Honorable sisters, brothers, and friends, good morning, good morning. Like to see you smile. Come to the conclusion that I've been trying for a year to delve into the man's greatest challenge, the discipline of theology. How did we get here? Why are we here? What best to do? But when I go out into the public, I don't speak about advanced concepts in theoretical mathematical physics, science, inventions, or other disciplines. I just do what I like, go to the grocery store and get what I need and so forth. And I have videos explaining all of that. You can research and reference them. So I have to then mention the top headlines of why I say I'm a semi-retired world-class scientist and inventor. Main interest and challenges in the discipline of theology, the study of all beliefs. Well, at least as far as public and popularity or something of public interest. But I want to get where I speak, because if God is here, there, excuse me, excuse me, please. I'm going to say this the way I am. If God is here, there, and everywhere, then He's here, there, and everywhere at any time, any place. Not just when you walk in church, and especially those who put on a front. And they're hypocrites. The greatest anger Christ had was against hypocrites. And the USA is kaput. It has lost due to the King George, Queen Hoover hypocrisy, not democracy, hypocrisy, especially from the viewpoint of theology and in a discipline of, in my opinion, military science and a discipline of science and inventions. Yeah, they have the power and have stolen from me forcibly. That doesn't still give them the right. It's still mine by the law of the land, by the law of God, humanity, and the law of the land. Constitution and Bill of Rights. By the Bill of Rights, my science and invention is mine. Absolutely, no matter what anybody says or does at any time, it's my science and invention, and I must, not quote or should, must be reasonably honored and compensated. Well, I've been trying for a year to get into the real challenge of the discipline of theology. How did we get here? Well, there's two main issues, two main opinions. That of this our natural world was brought here by supernatural power. And this supernatural power is a divine power of God. So the believers say creation power, God the Father Creator. Those who, especially in science, biology, and other science disciplines, in the overall discipline of science, a lot of them say, oh, no, how can anybody create such a vast universe? Well, think about it. If this natural universe, inert matter can't create itself. Definition of inert matter, can't create itself. So I'm forced to mention what I've achieved and why I say I'm a semi-retired world-class inventor. And that is, I had a one-on-one, it was really a showdown conference with Einstein. Finally, I was able to obtain that after a year. That J. Edgar, Homo, Hoover, that criminally insane fiend, that Einstein got angry. He agreed with me, both on my science and that we should work together. And he, to my surprise, even said angrily, I don't care what says, we're going to work together. Because I said, with my bold concepts and your ability in mathematical physics, I think it's a natural. We can, I think, put together a valid unified field theory. And he says, you're right, let's try that. But then he said, hey, you're telling me I can't do that, and I can't work with you. And I said, well, I suspected that, but I think you and I, like I say, it would be a natural. I think we should try it. We have the right to. Not that some secret police authority in Washington can decide what we can work on. He says, you're right. He said, I don't care what that fellow says. We're going to work together. Well, so on the day we're supposed to work, I called his living secretary. He used to take notes. Everything I say can be proven of our conversation, because he wanted to be absolutely sure. See, if you're born and live mainly and do your thinking and achievements in that language, then that's what you did the achievement in. And that's what you like to use in discussing it, or maybe even something more advanced. So he wanted me to speak in German. And I said, no, I only know a few words. And, you know, like from college, like we joke around, say, ein, drei, zwei, vier, who's going to buy the beer? And he laughed. The secretary took everything we said, notes. It was a three-way conversation. But it hadn't been recorded. So the night before, well, when I called and said, all right, I have prepared the initial presentation for us to work on now the attempt for valid unified field theory. And she was crying profusely. And I said, well, come on. You can say my idea, my presentation, what I think is valid, is not good. But why? Especially profusely, there's something wrong. She says, I confer with Dr. Einstein, please. She says, well, he's dead. Dead? He was in great health and spirits, it seemed like. She says, well, he suddenly died last night. What a coincidence. I have videos, at least a half a dozen, true exposés of that criminally insane Homo Hoover. Anybody who tried to get him out, or he didn't like, went up against him, seemed to die, and sometimes the night before, or violently were shot. President Kennedy didn't set himself up and want to be shot. Somebody, some power had to set him up. And that power was the fiendish, criminally insane J. Edgar Homo Hoover, whose buddy lived around the corner and used to go over there and stay there overnight with that Homo Hoover. And so he took over. True facts. Now, I want to get all of that as passé, because my opinion and decision is that theology is man's greatest challenge, and that's what I'm going to do. I get bored and disgusted with the power politics and plagiarism and the supposedly discipline of science. And the most undisciplined discipline of especially political science, which is called dirty politics by most for obvious reasons. Now, I'm going to mention a couple of items just to make sure that those who don't like me because they're prejudiced, or my speaking voice, or whatever reasons they want to have an excuse, or jealousy, I put forward an improvement, I said it professionally, politely to Einstein, called the capital C, called the Castellano transformation equations. I just called it the capital C transformation equations because I have capital X prime equals capital X minus vt over the square root of 1 minus v squared over capital C squared, where capital C is equal to or greater than the velocity of light. And he said, are you sure? I said, I'm sure. And we went into that discussion. And then when I gave him a theoretical experiment, and I want to get to that, someone retired scientist inventor, that's passé now. I have to have, first, if any time I have is towards man's greatest challenge, the discipline of theology. I'm preacher doc first. Then I think I've done as much as any man in the history of the United States, worldwide, world-class achievements. Well, I said, you use theoretical experiments, and I gave him a theoretical experiment proof. My rho prime equals m prime v prime r. I'm sure in the laboratory they don't mention it, but they have increments of particles that exceed the speed of light. So theoretically, at least, I'm sure I've broken the light barrier, and they have maybe particles that are faster than light. So in the laboratory, when my rho prime equals your rho, and my m prime v prime then will equal your mv, we set R to unity. Now, as I have the finite particle theory that I explained to him, as my mass goes towards an infinitesimal particle, my m prime is less than your m. My v prime must be greater than your v. And I'm sure I've theoretically at least broken the light barrier, BLV. And he agreed. Took his name off of what they call the Einstein transformation equation, the Lorentz-Einstein transformation equation. Do you understand? But the night before, he dropped dead. What a coincidence. And you'll see in my expose of that fiendish, criminally insane Homo Hoover, that those who tried to get him out died, usually violent death. Kennedy was shot. He didn't shoot himself. Hoover didn't pull the trigger, but Hoover was the power that set it up. Absolute true fact. And then he investigated with that bullet that went this way and that one, and it was laughable, really. So I want to try to do this in 15 minutes. Now, in theology, in the last 20 years, in my area especially, and nationally and worldwide, I've lifted the state-of-the-art of discipline of theology. They now don't try to memorize and show how great they are in memorizing the book, chapter, verse, sounding like quarterbacks in football, calling out all these numbers. I don't want to memorize the Bible. I want to comprehend the real reason God and Christ are here to prove, and that is what I concentrated on, and say that I have the universal pure Christians. Not that I'm pure or we are purer than anyone else. I have the clearest, thus purest, comprehension, realization, and presentation of God and Christ's divinity. Do you understand? The clearest, therefore purest, comprehension, realization, and presentation of God and Christ's divinity. Now, theology then, big main three questions, challenges is, how did we get here? Why are we here? What best to do? And how do we get here is the endless discussion. Some say they're quite maybe argumentative, but the discussion of their creation or evolution. Well, in my opinion, by the definition of inert matter, inert matter can't create itself. Now, if you have inert matter in this natural universe, where did this natural matter come from? You had to have at least a supernatural power to create this natural environment we have. the believers say this is the divine power of God, creation. The evolutionists especially say, scientists in biology and other science, the overall discipline of science, many in science say, what this vast universe, nobody could have created it. Not even a divine power could create such a vast universe of galaxies, millions of light years in diameter, whirling at tremendous speed. They now say that the speed's faster than the speed of light. What? Well, Einstein answered me. He says, after thinking carefully, he finally said, well, I think it's here. Well, now you're supposed to be the expert on matter. How can matter create itself? Well, maybe you can disintegrate, become molecules and atoms. Oh, gee, 15 minutes. Well, they give you 30 minutes. Well, where did the molecules and atoms and atomic, subatomic, and subatomic particles come from? You understand? It's still part of matter. So, one-on-one showdown with a PhD in creation, and they got me off of the internet. I say evolution. No, I'd say evolutionists, and they say no, it's evolutionists. Well, the evos got lawyers and so forth. They got me off the internet. They said I was preaching. Why? Maybe I then said, well, I'm considered a preacher. Or I preach or doc. Now, they said, absolutely, by evolution. Well, how did that evolve? How did that get here? Just here. Come on. If a supernatural power can't create nature, how can nature just be here that you then contradict yourself? Well, I said, won't you admit the possibility? By science, mathematics, anything is possible. Won't you admit the possibility? I'll admit the possibility that there can be evolution. Or there was a creation, and then from creation became man. Certainly anything's possible. Won't you admit that creation is possible? Seeing that inner matter can't create itself? No. They will not admit to anything that has to do with creation, because if they admit one little item, then they will lose the argument. Is there way of saying no, not possible? That contradicts mathematics and science. Well, when did you and animals were one and the same? If they were one and the same as you insist, you have proof. You're telling me I have to agree with you because you have proof. I don't have proof. I believe I have proof in the divine power of God. He gave sight to a blind man. That takes creative power. Well, yeah, they made him believe they were blind because they begged for money. No, he gave sight to a man that was born blind. Absolutely proved in their court of law. And that power, creation, sight of a man born blind. No, that's just a story. They want to go into when the Bible was written and by who. No. Well, you believe there was a Roman Empire and a Roman officer, a Caesar. He said he was God. And you have big movies, extravaganzas, and you know everything he said and did. You believe that, and that was maybe a couple hundred years before Christ. In Christ's time, it's after that. You go back to civilizations, the Egyptians and so forth, 5,000 years before Christ, you believe it. Now, Christ was written so many years after Christ died. Jesus died, Christ didn't die. Do you understand? It's Jesus Christ. Jesus was natural. Christ was the only begotten Son of the divine God. You have to comprehend that. And then with God and Christ's power, there was the resurrection. He rose body and soul into paradise. Like he said. He said, well, you're preaching now. Well, all right. This little old preacher Doc says that Christ said he could grant salvation and did. He gave sight to the blind. He created a new hand. Talk about creation. I have proof. He told the man, put out your hand. And the man had a withered hand. They even recorded what hand it was, where, when, why, and how, with all the witnesses, in a temple. The man put out his hand and he created a new hand. Isn't that creation of flesh and bone? And if the Son of God could create a new hand, no problem. Shouldn't be any doubt that Christ is divine Son of God with God's power, and God, divine Creator, could create flesh and bone of a human being. Or an animal. And then the animal became a human being. But there has to be creation. It didn't come from nothing. It wasn't just here. It has to be creation of the natural by supernatural power. And now I have worked scientifically to prove that. And that's what I want to present. My sermons on, it's Monday is the first day of the week. Your first duty is to save your soul. If everybody saved their own soul, what a wonderful world this would be. So in other languages, in guttural English, they say Sunday. But in other languages, they say it's Dios Day, Dominica. God's day. So first day of the week is Sunday, not the last day of the weekend. You see. And I have a proof, at least 40 divine miracle proofs. Then I have a happy hour. I talk about happy hour. Well, if you're a believer or a good person, you can be happy knowing that God judges, and nobody can play God. God and Christ had the power of you be granted eternal paradise with them in paradise. But the PhD said, no. I said, well, like when? 15 million years ago, everything was the same. An animal and humans was one. Yeah. Then man didn't develop man and developed animal. I says, well, then are you saying that 15 million years ago, man and a jackass were one and the same? Yes, they were same, and then from there evolved. I said, well, as I look around, I don't see jackasses becoming man, but I see some men, even with a high degree of education, kind of making a jackass of themselves. Hey, I'm not popular with the evos, the evolutions. Yeah, they got me off the internet, saying I was a preacher. And you can't preach on the internet. I'm just saying historical and religious truths. There were witnesses that saw Christ give this born blind man sight. And the man went before their court and said, I don't care what you do or say to me. I'm not going to lie that I was blind and I obtained sight. I don't know who he was because he was blind. He says, but that's the truth. And then they wanted to do something to his parents and him. Nothing changes, huh? Because they hit me and my father's family and me and my family and me. Because if they can control your family, they can then control you. And if they can control me, then they can control anybody in the U.S. or maybe anywhere. Because if I have this ability and I can survive, and I didn't survive because Hoover wanted me to live, I'm surprised I lived past the age of 75 and outlived Hoover. Because he figured this man ever goes public, he'll expose the crimes that Hoover committed in the Hoover Homo clique, the Hoover clique. They were not homos, but Hoover was, and his number 2 fellow there, Clyde Tolson. True facts. There are now maybe 1,000, hundreds of videos exposing Hoover and Einstein being a plagiarist. I used to defend him as a colleague and personal friend until I found out he stole Olinto de Pretos, E equals mv squared. And that's what he copied. But now they say E equals mc squared. They don't even know what they're talking about. Einstein originated E equals mc squared. No, he didn't even use C. He used V like the Preto presented, because they all knew each other and were related. And he spoke Italian. He read they discussed it with the De Preto. He put mv squared, the velocity of light, in calculations of the energy per tons of coal. Now, what I have to do then is say, this is semi-retired, world-class scientist and inventor. What? The Xerox, X-E-R-O-X. I have many videos, dotting the I, crossing T's, proving. I work for East Experimental Development Lab. X-E-R-O-X, X is the independent variable in mathematical physics. It balances the word. Absolutely true fact. Light amplification stimulated electromagnetic radiation. I'll say it a little slower, because now they got some kind of gimmick where if I talk slow, they say I have that tough New York accent. Can't be a scientist. Look, well, I grew up there, didn't realize I had an accent until I taped myself, played it back, and wow, I got a lousy New York accent. And scientists who came here from Italy, Enrico Fermi came here with 2 top scientists, and I've conferred with both. And one of them was a personal discussion at his home while we, I think, drank cognac. And he says, well, I close my eyes, and, you know, your capital X prime equals capital X minus VT over the square root of 1 minus V squared over capital C squared, and rho prime equals M prime V prime R. Set R to unity equals Einstein's rho. He says, you know, I close my eyes, that's great. He says, but you scare me. I said, scare you? He says, yeah. He says, when I first came to this country, he says, and I was on the subway in New York, he said, late at night, I would get scared if I could get home okay, because I hear those toughs of New York talk. I apologize. I played baseball, and I grew up in a tough neighborhood. There are a lot of tough neighborhoods. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, and I played baseball as a leadoff batter, what they call the holler guy. I was the leadoff batter, the holler guy, get on base, spark plug. So I developed, I guess, this voice, this type of how I speak. Like I say, nobody knew we had an accent. We all spoke the same. No. I have to say then, it's true, especially in science. When you improve on something, it becomes passé. Well, 25 years old overnight, it's just passé. So I'm a semi-retired world-class scientist and inventor. The Xerox, light amplification of electromagnetic radiation, because they spend a lot of money and time to give me a bad time, to try to keep me anonymous. And they now have somebody that talks real fast in different disciplines. I don't write these jokes. I just say, I just report them. Anything and everything, not to say he is telling the truth. He must, per God, humanity, rights, Constitution rights, Bill of Rights, civil rights, etc., obtain honors and reasonable compensation. Then I could buy my own church instead of just being on the internet. So I will then say, and I always say that, have a good day, and I mean it. Good morning, rise and shine, have a good day, because 24/7, that's the way I'm going to work with theology, man's greatest challenge, the discipline of theology. To believers and those who are good, I know this is the truth. Thank you.